What up guys? Welcome to the video. Today I'm going to try to give you a build guide for what I think is one of the coolest new items they came out with, the Doryani's prototype chess piece. We're going to take advantage of the huge damage bonuses that this item offers. This is one of the coolest builds I've ever done, and it definitely is one of the most complicated. So if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more milquetoast, a little bit more easy, this might not be the video for you. But if you're interested in learning some cool combinations, or just want to enjoy the show, stick around. I started shifting some gear around a few weeks ago, started kind of scheming on ways I could break this item, and I haven't really seen too many videos of people trying to break the item in a completely breaking this item sort of way. So what I did was I grabbed my miner character, my Saboteur, and everyone knows that Saboteurs do ridiculous damage. Some of the best damage in the game, single target. And lowering resistances is kind of a thing that you do for killing bosses. So I took those two ideas and I'm like, alright, ball lightning, miner for killing bosses. And it turns out it's pretty fine at mapping because miners are just an all-around good build. Also, it's important to note that I'm currently not playing League, so I do have a few legacy items. They're not super important or super game breaking, so I will mention them in the gear section and suggest alternate options which are available for you League players. So first, quickly, I'd like to go over what is a Mine Saboteur, for those of you who may not know. Basically, it's a spellcaster. Simple spellcaster. The only thing is that you use your mines to cast your spells instead of you. The perk is that you can do the most damage in the game by using mines to activate your spells. The backdraw is you can't leech life, mana, you have to detonate your mines, so it's kind of annoying. But you can't take reflect damage either, so sort of cool. The button I use to detonate my mines is my left mouse click. This doubles as my movement button. And also, if I don't feel like moving and I want to detonate my mines, I use my thumb button as well. So now we made it to the armor, right? The Doryani's prototype armor. It reads, deal no non-lightning damage, so we will only be benefiting from lightning damage. Armor also applies to lightning damage taken from hits, and lightning resistance doesn't affect lightning damage taken. So this causes a lot of issues we need to overcome. More on that in a minute. Lastly, nearby enemies have lightning resistances equal to yours. This is core to our build, and this is what allows us to do crazy damage output, especially to bosses. Maybe 2, maybe 3 times more than a solid endgame build would already have. The issues we need to overcome from this item are we can't get enough armor to reduce lightning damage taken effectively. It's just not possible if we want to keep our damage numbers up. I feel for anyone who tried this method as it just doesn't work. The next, armor will not reduce damage taken from lightning degen, which many bosses have this type of damage and you will die in a single tick without fixing this issue. Thirdly, we'll need to lower our lightning resistances. We're not going to be going past 120 in this build due to the limited options for overcoming lightning damage degen, damage over time. So let's tackle the armor issue first. The way armor works is it is less effective against higher damage hits. This means we cannot account for boss level hits, meaning stacking armor is a bad idea. The only solution that exists here is to convert lightning damage taken into anything else. The first thing we use is a keystone for Divine Flesh. We can get this by using a Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel which reads, sacrificed in the name of Exhibicu. Mine is pretty simple and gives a bit of lightning damage from a single node. It's interesting to note that using a Divine Orb on a Timeless Jewel can change the name of whose name the jewel sacrifices in. So that's 50% of the lightning damage we take converted. Then we're going to use an Avian Twins Talisman with the implicit of 50% of lightning damage taken from hits is taken as cold damage, or fire damage. I'm unsure exactly how this conversion works. It stands to reason that the calculations would be separated. So half of lightning damage is taken as cold damage, then half of the remaining amount is taken as chaos damage. This would leave us with 25% lightning damage taken from hits will still need to be reduced by armor. But this number is much more reasonable and easy to overcome with just armor. Also, it's important to note I am unsure if this is how the conversion actually works. It could very well be that we take no lightning damage from hits after these two calculations are done. If someone knows and wants to leave a comment, increase our knowledge of the game, that would be very cool of you. So there are 2 ways we can get an Avian Twins Talisman. The cheap way would be to snipe a good one from POE trade. but this won't have an anointment on it, and it might not match your build exactly. The way I made one is I bought a few amulets with decent life, multi, the resistances I needed, and an open suffix. Crafted mine throw speed for the suffix. I anointed it with a really strong mine passive node, and then I took it to a rank 2 Jorgen research altar. I could have improved the quality, but I already made several attempts on this, and the catalysts were getting pretty expensive, and this was the weakest amulet I attempted it on. It's important for me to note that this is very RNG based and could take you a very long time to do. There are 8 types of tier 2 talismans, and even if you hit the right one, there's still a 2/3 chance it will be the wrong damage typing. So now that our lightning damage from hits is fixed, how do we mitigate the lightning degen? The unfortunate answer, we do our best. The first thing we look for again is Divine Flesh. We're going to double dip here again. The way the text reads is elemental damage is taken as chaos, and it doesn't specify hits. So this should help our dot damage taken. Again, if I'm mistaken here, let me know and I will add a note to correct this. Next, we look for reduced damage taken from damage over time. In Standard, you can find a shield with this craft for up to 20%, but it's a legacy craft. Otherwise, you can find a hunter's shield with this stat up to 10%. Next, we look at our ascendancies. We get 10% reduced damage taken from blinded enemies, and we blind enemies, let me tell you. Next, we look at our Pantheon. There's another 5% hidden in there. Also in the Pantheon, there's a really cool option for any Divine Flesh build in the Minor God category. 5% reduced chaos damage taken. This further reduces the degen from lightning we take as well. Finally, we use a cast when damage taken in Mortal Call for 34% less elemental damage taken. All in all, we don't mitigate this damage effectively enough, at least compared to a normal build. And we do need to be careful around lightning degen damage, but in playtesting for several days, I haven't noticed an issue with degen damage yet. So the last challenge for us to overcome, to use this chess piece, is to figure a way to lower our lightning resistances. Lowering this to less than 100, negative 100, will absolutely destroy bosses. Most bosses have between 40 and 50% lightning resistance at base. A well-made endgame build could maybe use 40 to 60% elemental penetration and spend considerable resources to get that. From our chest alone, we set the boss's resistance to negative 120. This results in a huge benefit to overall boss DPS. We can still use penetration to get even more damage, but we can't use things like exposure or conductivity because they read things like cursed enemies have negative 44 lightning resistance. Enemies that have resistances equal to yours cannot have their resistances reduced in this way. If the item doesn't say penetrate, you are not changing the enemy's resistances further. The way I choose to lower my resistances is I use 3 Thread of Hope jewels. I use them in 3 key locations to reduce pathing to high value nodes. So you start at negative 60 as a baseline for your resistance. Then by using 3 Thread of Hopes, you can get to 120 negative lightning resist. Now, if you're worried about degen damage, you may not need all the Thread of Hopes. The base negative 60 is a pretty good damage buff on its own, but we're looking to break this item, so we go all out. If you wanted to look into a different skill tree of some kind, maybe use a second large cluster jewel, try to get similar damage, I don't think you'll be able to. I think that this is the way to go to completely break your damages. So that does it for the armor. We did it. Up till now, this has actually just been a build guide for this item alone. So moving on to the rest of the build, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. It should get a lot easier now. I'm using a pretty sweet large cluster jewel. It has the notable Thunderstruck on it. This is super cool when paired with things like Ball Lightning, because the Ball Lightnings will push the boss along with them, increasing their Ball Lightning's damage uptime, so you get more overall damage out of a single Ball Lightning. Kind of cool. It's not really needed because of how much damage we actually do, but I thought I would note it because it kind of is sweet. Next, check out my helmet. It has the legacy suffix throw an additional mine. This allows my main link to skip the minefield gem. I'm actually not sure if it's stronger than using minefield or not, but you get more damage multipliers in your 6 lengths, so kind of cool. If you don't have this helmet or you're playing in League, be sure to use something like a minefield or at least swift assembly. This helmet will allow me to also use a second set of mines. I use this for clearing purposes, as a 5-link mine setup is plenty to crush high level mobs, and since this is for clear purposes, I use charge trap support. I couldn't find a better way to slide in frenzy charges to my build, and the increased throw speed does really make mapping go a little bit quicker. For the clear skill, I tried pretty much every lightning gem that would work in here. The notable good ones are a second set of ball lightning linked with lesser multiple projectiles. A Vol Spark was really nice with Awakened Fork and projectile speed. I didn't like Arc very much. It didn't seem to be able to really do its job. The Val Arc didn't really crush everything like I was kind of hoping at this level of damage. So I wouldn't recommend Arc here. And I really liked Shock Nova, actually. It could just be because it's visually very attractive, but it definitely does feel like one Mind Throw of Shock Nova will completely crush every enemy in the area. The backdraw is you have to throw it out more often if the packs are really close to each other, because the ball lightning will just inherently travel to the next pack. For the enchant on the helmet, I would try to get ball lightnings, fire an additional projectile, but I'm pretty lazy, so I doubt I'll actually ever get that. For the boot enchants, you want 10% lightning penetration if you haven't killed recently. Since our mines do the killing, we always have this buff. For the gloves, you can get something like Commandment of Spite when hit. Since you won't be killing enemies, you can't use any of the kill enemies ones. So moving on, I will now point out how important it is for this build to get as much increased damage on your main hand and your ring as possible. The passive tree is very light on increased damage nodes, and it's important to get this value over 500% for your damage to be really effective. The tree focuses mainly on crit multi, some flat multipliers. Luckily, the Mark of the Shaper Ring gives us a huge chunk of damage, and it should be pretty cheap to get a main hand around 140% increased lightning spell damage. The last choice you need to make is to use Blast Chain Mine or High Impact Mine. I'm not an expert on this area, so if I make any mistakes, let me know. Blast Chain gives you more damage when you activate a chain of mines. That means one button click on 20 mines will deal an average of 50% more damage. But if you choose to spam your mines, like I do, and you sort of need to, but like half of the time, you won't get much of a bonus. High Impact Mines work well with the Saboteur's Ascendancy, which has a passive called Demolition Specialists that gives 100% increased effect of auras cast by mines. Basically, for every mine you have nearby an enemy, you now have a 4% chance to deal double damage. So at 20 mines, you would have 80% more damage. My build only throws enough mines to really keep this number at around 40% or more, which isn't bad. Also, it's important to note that Blast Chain makes your spell deal 25% less damage at base, whereas High Impact only makes them deal 20% less damage at base. Also, as a side note, not taking Demolition Specialists isn't an option for this build. The alternate passive gives +6 to all resistances on the Miner node, which would actually result in a net negative to overall damage. So now here's a question that I have. How do we deal with the porcupines? I couldn't figure out a way to do it. So what I do is when I run into a map with strong porkies, I switch in a cast when damage taken frost wall setup, so the first spike hits me, takes me down to half health or something like that, and then a frost wall appears in front of me and takes the rest of the projectiles. There are also a few other bosses that would be shut down by something like frost wall, cast when damage taken. Blocking the Redeemer's Ice Spear volley comes to mind, so keep your mind open for using it creatively. When running general maps, you will definitely want to not be running Frost Wall, as you will get trapped constantly by your own walls, and you, like me, will die. I run a rank 1 Purifying Flame for general use for those sweet life regen puddles. And just a quick note on the flask, be sure to use a mana flask with the modifier Flask Effects Not Removed at full mana. Pairing this with Immune to Freeze would be exceedingly strong for opening chests or any map with a lot of freezing type effects. Lastly, I'm going to go over the other options for build mechanics, variants of the build that you might have considered already. There's a helmet called Cowl of the Thermophile. This is not the correct way to lower your resistances. The relevant text reads 50% reduced cold resistance. This is not the same as Thread of Hope, which reads -20% to all elemental resistances. I foolishly tried this method, and to my horror at the end of my first build, realized the difference in wording. A cleverly rolled Venter's Gamble would work well for this build, but it's not Elder base, so it would prevent us from using the Shaper's Mark Ring in the other slot. I haven't checked if you could chance an Elder Venter's Gamble, but that would be pretty cool if you did. A Bottled Faith is a really nice endgame option here, replacing the Rumi's Flask. This is a really strong damage boost at the price of a really strong defensive boost. A Dying Sun could be used for more ball lightning projectiles, replacing the Rumi flask again. This is an okay way to increase your map clear speed. In summary, it was an absolute challenge coming up with this practical way to use the Doryani's prototype. We're absolutely busting the item. The first attempt I used was Stormbrand. It was fine, I didn't like it. And then I tried a Juggernaut using Doryani's Fist. It was fine, I didn't like it. It was too slow. Something like a Slayer or Berserker might have been a lot better. And that brings me here. It was a long road this past month or so, and I was almost going to quit after my first two characters just felt awful. But I'm really proud of this one. I believe it's going to be part of my lineup for some time. As an aside, I also think using Cast on Crit Cyclone for like Ball Lightning would be very strong as well. I'm going to go hover over each item, all the passives, all the flasks, all that stuff. There won't be any more content after that, so if you'd rather view this information in Path of Building, this is goodbye. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it helped you in some small way. Thanks for watching.
There's a flashing in my eyes. Don't you see my condition? The fiction is gone running again. Can't you see now? Illusions right into your mind. Deja vu, I've just been in this place before. Higher on the street, and I know it's my time to go. Calling you, and the search is a mystery. Standing on my feet, it's so hard when I try to be me.